The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report with Dom and Charles. Dom, you look upset.
I am, Charles. I feel terrible. I've done the wrong thing, and so have you.
Oh, what?
We've
Really?
got to correct the record. We need to apologise.
Oh, dear.
This is a formal apology. Look, I know normally we're flipping about stuff, but we need to apologise
Oh, dear. Yes.
to Ben Roberts Smith.
Oh.
The murdering war criminal. You know that guy?
Doesn't he need to apologise to, well, basically everyone?
The Australian people.
Yeah.
And some probably some widows.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
but
did we get it wrong?
We got
Is
it wrong.
he not a war criminal?
He's a lovely person who's in the wrong place at the wrong time, killing the wrong people for the wrong reasons. And I know this because I just read Peta Credlin's column in the Daily Telegraph.
Right.
I'll explain more after this. So she says, "Look, I'm not gonna jump on board with this. It's more complicated. It's more morally complicated than we thought, Charles."
It's more morally complicated that very long trial that...
Yeah. I don't think we should rush to judge. That's the thing. We weren't there.
Yes.
We weren't there. Admittedly, the trial did speak to people who were there for 110 days, but we weren't there. And Peta Credlin makes the point that she went to Tarankout 4 times. So she's been to Afghanistan.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, admittedly
So
in the
she's-
very safe bubble bit with Tony Abbott, presumably.
Yeah, bit of an expert.
Yeah, she's an expert.
Oh, is that was she there when Tony Abbott made that thing about shit happens? Like,
Oh, probably.
when people die, when soldiers die, well, shit happens.
Shit gets machine gunned and then kicked off a cliff and then their prosthetic leg souvenirs as a drinking trophy. So, I mean, she asks great questions. I'm quoting here. When does a beaten enemy go from being a combatant to a prisoner, Charles? That's such a hard line to know, Peta Credlin points out. Like, they're a combatant when they're shooting at you. When you captured them and they're defenceless, does that make them a prisoner or does that make them someone you haven't killed yet? It's really hard to know.
Surely that's like one of the easiest lines to know. Like, especially if you're a soldier and you've got a whole lot of procedures about how to subdue your enemy.
I mean, it's called the law of war, generally speaking. And
Yeah.
I presume the training covers when you're allowed to shoot people. I would have thought that would be day one of the training, but I wasn't there, as Peta Credlin points out. I don't know what it was like. She says, look, you don't know what it's like being an SAS commando, and they're killing people, Charles, who would do us harm, who hate our values. That's what she says.
But isn't the point that, yeah, that's right, but the whole point about a well-trained soldier is that they know when to start killing and also when to stop killing? Isn't that the whole point about this whole trial?
I'm not sure that any of us, Peter writes, who have never been exposed to deadly combat can fully grasp just how psychologically fraught and morally deadening this can be. So she won't join the pile-on.
Yes.
All these journalists, vindicated journalists, she points out, who've never risked a bullet for our country, now triumphantly describing him as a liar, a bully and a murderer. Admittedly, the judge also described him as those things. But it's the journos she takes issue with, Charles, the journos who'd never taken a bullet for this country.
Well, maybe that's very convincing, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
It is. We weren't there.
As someone who has been there 4 times, admittedly very briefly in the safe space,
Yeah. And so
I think I should take her word for it rather than all the witnesses against Ben Robert Smith who were
in
actually...
the SAS alongside him and appalled by his behaviour so much so that they broke the code to report it. Apparently he tried to intimidate them, by the way, into not giving evidence. This is another thing that's come out. So what I've decided to do, Charles, and I invite you and I invite Peta Credlin to join me in this, I'm going to be going to Afghanistan. I'm going to be machine gunning defenceless non-combatants and souveniring them because I want to know if it's wrong.
Yes,
I can't possibly
know unless you've done it yourself.
It's got to be a hail of bullets.
Yes.
And so I think an elderly man, I don't know who I'm going to choose for this, a useless elderly man, possibly Tony Abbott. I've got to shoot someone to know whether it's wrong. I can't rely on
Well, you don't need to go to
word.
Afghanistan to do it. Surely you can just go to Mossman or something.
I could go to Forest. I'm not going to say that because the AFP will chase me. No, but Charles, how do we know if it was wrong? And how does the judge know? How does the judge know if it was right or wrong? On what basis does the judge say he was definitely responsible for those murders, well, at least on the balance of probabilities, and therefore a murderer and a war criminal.
Well, this sort of brings up the whole problem with our entire justice system, doesn't it? Because if you follow Peta Credlin's logic, then, how do you know whether stealing is bad unless you've stolen something?
That's true.
How do you know if
Genocide.
genocide is bad unless you've done it yourself?
She also points out, Charles, and this is that fits of moral indignation are characteristic of these times. And the pariah status that we seem so happy to confer on people, she says, sometimes turns out to be undeserved. Can you think of some examples of people who've been made pariahs and it was undeserved? Because she can.
Tony Abbott, for example.
She doesn't cite. She cites Cardinal George Pell.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Team Pell.
How does she know that fiddling with boys is wrong? Because she hasn't done it.
One assumes.
One assumes. Whereas, Cardinal George Pell, he was actually very well qualified to oversee the Melbourne response.
That's right.
Into child paedophilia because he himself had done it.
And whether or not you think he did it, Charles, or merely covered up for many other priests who did it.
Yes.
Well,
you can't go against a cover-up unless you've covered up something yourself.
Well,
exactly.
She did work in the PMO. She probably had a bit of experience with that. She also cites Bruce Lemon, who was on Channel 7.
Yes.
She seems to be the only person who's on his side after his appearance on Channel 7. Channel 7 seems to be the place to go for cell phones, whether it's Ben Roberts-Smith, who's now resigned, by the way, as the manager of Channel 7 in Queensland, or Bruce Lemon, who, I didn't watch the interview, but a lot of people who did seem to find him not entirely convincing.
Not a credible witness?
No. More of a Credlin witness than a credible witness.
Did they ask him why he gave 3 different responses and reasons for why he had left abruptly from Parliament House that night?
It was the key question, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the key question. I know that I've seen this morning he's been quoted in the press as saying, well, the actual reason is because I got a whole lot of text messages from my girlfriend saying, where are you? Did they go into the question of why did he keep changing his story at the time?
Well, because here's the thing that Peta Credlin would say, you weren't there. And he was there and he doesn't know either. So sometimes, Charles, even when you were there, you don't know the reason.
Yes, and, who are we to comment? We've never changed our story 3 times, so we don't know what it's like, so we can't comment on it.
I mean, Charles, the bit in the column that I found most convincing, right, and I'm quoting again here, what's happened to the old presumption that people are innocent until proven guilty? I mean, that's about going through a court case, isn't it, which just happened in the case of Norris Smith.
Yes.
Or the understanding that only those without sin should be the first to cast a stone. And that's from the Bible. That's very impressive. And so I presume that given that she thinks that only people without sin can cast stones, Peta Credlin will immediately resign as a columnist for the Daily Telegraph and a commentator on Sky News on the basis that she's in no position to criticise anybody else ever, which seems to be her job, Charles, which seems to be her job.
Yes. Look, I think that she needs to be immediately, she's clearly an idiot. I think she needs to be immediately made the new host of Q&A. Yeah. Don't you think?
Well, I mean, she could have been the new host of Sunrise, but they've gone with Shervo.
Oh, really?
Matt Shervington is the new host of Sunrise.
So wait a minute, that's a bit humiliating for Carl Stefanovic if Matt Shervington's going to beat him in the ratings.
Oh, yeah. That would be embarrassing, wouldn't it?
Well, I think that is going to happen, isn't it?
Well, unless this kills Sunrise, just to move on to another subject.
Yeah.
But I mean, Charles, how can we know who the host should be unless we're in the room, except by having watched Shervo being fairly underwhelming on a whole range of TV shows? It's just very hard to judge, Charles. It's hard to judge is what I've learned from Peta Credlin. It's a valuable moral lesson. And again, I just think the entirety of Sky News should listen to what Peta says. She says, don't judge others unless you were there, even if you were.
That means Rowan Dean might need to resign.
Oh, shit, does this mean I can't judge Rowan Dean? Because it's my favourite thing to do.
The Chaser Report. News you can't trust.
Well, no, but isn't the point that we don't have to follow what Peta Credlin's saying? Because for us to follow what Peta Credlin's saying, we would have to have been there when Peta Credlin was writing the column.
That's true.
But we weren't
there.
And so therefore we don't know what she said, because even if we can read it, that we weren't there
we weren't
witnessing her writing it.
And we don't know what it's like to have been Tony Abbott's chief of staff. I mean, imagine what that would do to a person.
Exactly. I mean, yes, exactly. Like that would be like being subjected to sort of war crime style things each day, like contraventions of the Geneva Convention.
Yes.
And it would give you permanent PTSD, which is why she's ended up on Sky News.
I mean, imagine having to go to work in any given day. And my heart goes out to Peta Credlin, right?
Yes.
And having to deal with, the Prime Minister's just eaten a raw onion. We can't really spin this. I don't know what. The Prime Minister's just decided on Australia Day to give Prince Philip, the Prince, like literally the husband of the Queen, a knighthood. How do you go on after an experience like that?
Yeah, he was a weird unit.
He was a weird unit.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing is, it's just making me think, actually, well, maybe we've got this all wrong. Just with Peta Credlin's thing of not judging. See, I detect Charles elsewhere in her column. She's judging the people who've criticised Ben Roberts-Smith. But she wasn't there when she doesn't know what it's like to criticise Ben Roberts. She doesn't know what it's like to say that guy's a fucking war criminal because she hasn't done it. How dare she judge Ben Roberts-Smith's critics, including the judge in this case?
So in some ways, what we're saying, it's a sort of call for radical ignorance about everything.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the only people who are allowed to comment on anything ever are the people who've personally done it and experienced it themselves.
I mean, I was told, Charles, that the thing that made humans so special was that we could hear a story about something and gain the moral lessons from it without needing to experience it. But clearly that was wrong.
No.
I mean, Charles, in many ways, the heroes in this scenario, now that I think more about it, are Ben Roberts-Smith's critics. Because you know what they've done? These journalists, their fellow SAS troops, they've criticised someone who machine guns people he doesn't like and throws them off a cliff. And if they've got prosthetic limbs, he drinks beer out of them. That's very brave. Why aren't the critics of Ben Roberts-Smith not getting Victoria Crosses? They've taken him on. He knows where they live, Charles.
Well, this is my theory about why Kerry Stokes bankrolled the whole trial, right? Which is
$25 million.
Because it's come out that, well, they're saying now today that they're saying it might be as much as $40 million.
Well, it could be double, because of the Nine and the other newspapers' costs.
So what happened was 2 years ago, Nine wrote to Ben Roberts-Smith and his lawyers and said, we are offering to settle this case right here, right now. No expenses on either side.
Yeah.
Just release us from liability, for the comments that we've made.
Make it go away. That's right. I saw this. And there would be no trial. They were worried about the impact on the witnesses and on everybody involved having to have 110 days in court.
And they said, look, the journalists, Nick McKenzie and Chris Masters, they're very keen to go to trial. They've won every single stage up until now. The AFP are very clearly very happy that this civil trial is happening because it gives them a chance to sort of have a look at that before they launch any criminal proceedings. But we suggest that we're making this offer basically on commercial grounds, which is this is going to cost a stack ton of money and you're going to be liable for it at the end. And why don't we just call it quits now because you're clearly going to lose? To which the Ben Roberts-Smith lawyers then wrote back 2 weeks later going, thank you for your very judgmental letter. And went, well, actually, Ben Roberts-Smith is also very, very confident about this trial and he assumes that his word will be taken as true and therefore your clients don't have a leg to stand on, which is ironic.
The circumstances. There's one thing we weren't short of in this trial, it was legs. Spare legs. Well, no, look, this is the unique folly of people who undertake defamation actions.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know. It seems as though, look, who can really know if someone really did a thing? But if there's a chance of the process making, like even if Ben Roberts-Smith had won this case, right, I don't think people were thinking terribly highly of him, like just because of all the revelations that came out. It's a brutal process to go through.
Yes.
Any kind of defamation trial, which is why I implore Charles, anyone who listens to this podcast or reads the Chaser newspaper or the books or anything we do, don't sue us for defamation, you fucking idiots. it'll blow up in your face. We will win.
Yes.
And even if we don't win, you'll still lose.
Yes.
It's you may as well cut off your own leg and replace it with a prosthesis. That's less painful than going through a defamation trial.
And anyway, you're not allowed to. Well, but did you see this morning Channel 10 suing Peter Van Onselen?
I did see that.
Yeah. So
Another person we've known for a long time. Well, we should get him on. Maybe we should get him on the podcast. PVO, if you're available, jump on. I don't think we can afford to have Peter Van Onselen on the podcast.
No. But I think the point is that you can't sue us. You shouldn't sue us. And according to the Peta Credlin logic, there's no possibility for you to sue us because
or anybody.
You weren't here when this was being recorded now. And we made all those terribly defamatory comments about
that.
You.
Also makes me think, Charles, that I shouldn't judge. I shouldn't judge the editors at the Telegraph and the Herald Sun and the people who run Sky News for their decision to hire Peta Credlin. I shouldn't try and second guess what the fuck they were thinking. It's unclear.
Exactly. Yes, you weren't there.
I wasn't there.
You're not allowed to comment.
And if I was there, maybe I would have made the same brilliant decision.
Our gear is from Road. We're part of the Iconoclast Network. Catch you next time.